The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program presents Arkansas's Haunted Colleges and Universities. The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program is an agency of the Department of Arkansas Heritage. The AHPP's mission is to identify, evaluate, and preserve significant historic sites around the state. The AHPP oversees the National Register of Historic Places for Arkansas. The National Register is an honor roll of important places around the United States. Now, let's talk about National Register buildings at 5 colleges and universities around Arkansas and the spooky stories associated with them. Keep in mind that ghost stories are folklore. Folklore are traditional stories, customs, sayings, dances, or other forms of art preserved by a specific culture, generally through word of mouth. Ghost stories are a specific type of folklore that assume you believe in ghosts and includes a haunting as a part of the story's action or plot. No ghost story can be proven true or false, but that isn't the point. Ghost stories are meant to share an experience. You'll have to make up your own mind whether or not you think ghosts are real. Cane Hill in Washington County was first settled by Americans in 1827. Most of the early settlers were from the Little Rock area and moved to Cane Hill after the Western Cherokee were forced out by the Trail of Tears. Cane Hill became the site of Arkansas's first public school, library, and Sunday school. It was also home to Arkansas's first institution of higher learning, Cane Hill College. It opened in 1835. The area around Cane Hill was still rough country in 1835. It was ambitious for the townspeople to start a school in such a place, but they were devoted to education. A meeting was held at the local Presbyterian church, and plans were made for opening the Cane Hill School. Its first building was a 2-story log structure. For 15 years, the school educated students through the 8th grade. In 1850, Cane Hill School was given a charter by the state to begin offering high school diplomas. 2 years later, Cane Hill College was also given a charter, and the first college in Arkansas opened. By 1858, Cane Hill College owned 4 structures, including a dormitory and a brick classroom building. In 1861, the Civil War began, and Cane Hill College closed its doors. After a large snowstorm in October of 1862, Union forces in Arkansas began to find places to camp for the winter. One division of soldiers under the command of Brigadier General James Blunt stayed in northwest Arkansas. Mild weather after that first snowstorm encouraged Confederate leaders to send Brigadier General John Marmaduke to northwest Arkansas to gather food for troops at Fort Smith. General Blunt got word of the cavalry heading north and brought 5,000 men to confront them. The two armies encountered each other at Cane Hill. For the next 9 hours, a moving battle stretched along 15 miles of road. After the Civil War, Cane Hill continued to show its devotion to education. By 1875, Cane Hill College was granting bachelor's degrees to women. It was the first college in the state to do so. On October 10, 1885, a tragedy struck Cane Hill College. All 4 of the buildings on campus burned to the ground. The townspeople thought it was arson, but no one was ever arrested. 1 year later, a new brick building was constructed. The college didn't benefit from this new building for very long. The new Arkansas Industrial University opened just 20 miles away in Fayetteville. The competition took a toll on Cane Hill College. It closed in 1891. The ghost stories at Cane Hill have to do with its earliest history. On June 15, 1839, Cane Hill resident Nancy Wright awoke when she heard men and horses outside her home. Cherokee, who lived just across the border in Oklahoma, still harbored hard feelings toward the white settlers. Nancy Wright thought the noise outside her house might be Native Americans, come to steal from the family. Male voices called to the family, asking if they could offer lodging for the night. When Mr. Wright opened the door, the men stabbed him with a bowie knife. The men proceeded to kill 4 of the Wrights' children, including an infant. One son was left with permanent brain damage. Mrs. Wright and 5 other children escaped. 36 vigilantes calling themselves the Cane Hill Regulating Company rounded up several men they considered suspects and hung them from a tree. There was no hard evidence and no formal trial. Many people speculated that the Cane Hill Regulating Company got the wrong men and killed innocents. Years later, 2 men in Indian Territory confessed to the crime on their deathbeds. No one is sure who killed the Wright family. Reports say that cars often stall out at Cane Hill. Some people claim their vehicles have been pulled backwards, as if something is trying to keep them there. One night, a woman drove a friend home around 1 a.m. After the lady dropped off her friend, she drove back through town. On the porch of a business next to the road, the lady saw a man hanging, with his neck cocked to one side and his shoes 3 feet off the ground. The lady turned around and drove back to the spot, sure that someone had committed suicide. She'd clearly seen a person hanging from that porch, and she couldn't just keep going. As she pulled into the parking lot and started toward the porch, she looked up again. There was nothing there at all, except the moonlight and the wind. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the first Morrill Land Grant College Act. This law gave federal lands to states to sell so that they could use the money to start agricultural colleges. This was the beginning of the state university system in Arkansas. Several towns across the state thought about bidding for the new school, including Fayetteville, Little Rock, Batesville, Prairie Grove, and Viney Grove. The citizens of Fayetteville and Washington County raised $130,000 to support their proposal. It was very difficult to get to Fayetteville in 1871. From Little Rock, the new college's trustees had to ride a train to Morrilton, take a steamboat up the Arkansas River to Van Buren, and travel the last 60 miles over the Boston Mountains in a stagecoach. Even though it was difficult to get there, the trustees chose the McElroy Farmstead in Fayetteville as the location for the college. The site, located on a hilltop west of downtown Fayetteville, provided plenty of acreage. It was considered a healthy location, safe from the malaria that plagued other parts of the state. Arkansas Industrial University opened to students in January 1872. The first class had 7 students taught by a faculty of 3. The first building on the campus was finished in 1875. Now known as Old Main, it is symbolic of the university. The second oldest building on the campus is Carnal Hall, which was built as a girls' dormitory. It is named after Ella H. Carnal, one of the university's first female faculty members. She was an associate professor of English and modern languages from 1891 to 1894, when she died of typhoid fever. Carnal Hall was completed in 1906 at a cost of $35,000. At the time, it was on the edge of campus, far away from the male dormitories. By the 1990s, Carnal Hall was left abandoned. Just before the university closed the building for good, a student visited to take photographs. She started on the first floor, wandering from room to room. She heard footsteps on the second floor, but thought there was someone else in the building. After she walked through the entire structure, she realized that she was alone. There was no one to make those footsteps. When her film ran out, she stopped in a first-floor library. There were 2 books lying on the center of a long table. When she turned to leave, she heard a loud bam. When she turned to look, she realized the books were on the floor close to her feet. She says she took 3 photos of the door that day. 2 were normal, but one shows something very odd. What do you think? In the early 2000s, Carnal Hall was turned into a hotel where students who are studying hospitality can get training. Since the hall reopened, there have been several reports of strange apparitions in the building. One of the building engineers said that he was working with another engineer in the basement. As they stepped into the hallway, they were surprised by a floating gown without a head or feet. It came out of the wall, went across the hallway, and disappeared into another wall. In the early 20th century, American life changed. The United States had always been a country of farmers. 100 years ago, farmers began to leave the countryside and move into the cities. This change disturbed many people because they felt the decline of rural life would have a negative impact on the United States as a whole. This was known as the country life movement. In 1909, the Arkansas Farmers Educational Cooperative Union lobbied the Arkansas legislature to form 4 agricultural colleges. They were located in Jonesboro, Russellville, Magnolia, and Monticello. These schools later became Arkansas State University, Arkansas Tech University, Southern Arkansas University, and the University of Arkansas at Monticello. Originally, all the agricultural colleges were secondary schools, or what we call high schools today. The 2nd District Agricultural School at Russellville opened in 1910. College classes were added in 1922, and by 1924 the school was teaching students from high school freshmen to college seniors. The oldest building on campus was originally called the Girls Domestic Science and Art Building, built in 1913. It is now called Browning Hall. This is where female students learned about nutrition, sewing, food production, and other areas related to homemaking. The Great Depression began in 1929. It caused massive unemployment and hunger all over the United States and in Arkansas. Although this was a difficult time, the greatest amount of construction on the campus happened during the Great Depression. Government programs like the Emergency Relief Administration hired the nation's unemployed to work on public improvement projects like buildings on college campuses. The Textionary, or the Physical Education Building, was built in 1937 by the Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works. Hughes Hall was constructed in 1940 by the Works Progress Administration. Caraway Hall was built in 1934, also by the Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works. It was built as a girls' dorm and has remained so throughout its history. This is also the site of the most famous haunting on the campus. According to campus folktales, a girl named Gracie was staying in Caraway Hall in the 1950s. She experienced some kind of personal tragedy. Some say she was having family problems. Others say she had a broken heart. One night, Gracie decided to take her own life. She hung herself out the window above the front door of the building so that she would be found dangling over the doorway. Ever since, she has haunted Caraway Hall. She walks the halls at strange hours of the night, causing the sound of footsteps. Some residents have reported seeing Gracie too. A few years ago, a girl was found staring intently at the wall but saying nothing. A resident assistant asked her what she was doing, and she said, "I'm talking to Gracie." Although Tucker Coliseum is not old enough to be considered historic, it does have a ghost story. The Coliseum is home to Arkansas Tech basketball. To understand the ghost of Tucker, we have to go back to the early 1960s. James Paul Lovelady was born in Dover, Arkansas in 1939. He was a basketball star from an early age. By the time he got to high school, JP was such a good athlete he was considered one of the best in the state. He was also considered especially tall for the time at 6 foot 5 inches. JP went on to play for the Arkansas Tech Wonder Boys in college, where he led the team to several national tournaments. By the time he reached his senior year, many people thought James Paul would be playing professionally. In late February 1961, JP was gravely injured in a late-night automobile accident just outside of Dover. His injuries were critical, but doctors thought he might pull through even if it ended his basketball career. Sadly, JP's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. He died from a blood clot. Students at Tech and citizens in Dover went into mourning. Around 800 people attended his funeral at Dover on February 25th. That's more people than made up the population of the town. Even though Tucker Coliseum wasn't built until 15 years after JP died, many people claim he haunts the place. Sam Strassner, a longtime employee, said that one morning he walked past the trophy case to find a men's tennis trophy from the 1980s, neatly disassembled piece by piece, and the pieces were stacked around the base of the trophy. There were 2 doors into the trophy case, and only about 2 or 3 people had a key to it. Strassner could not come up with a reasonable explanation. Other reports of ghostly happenings in Tucker include hearing a basketball bouncing on the floor at night when there is no one in the building. In 2009, the basketball coach reported hearing someone hissing at him from the Coliseum seats while he stood alone on the basketball court. Witherspoon Hall houses the history, music, and English departments at Arkansas Tech. In 1950, Gene Witherspoon took over the band program. Dr. Witherspoon introduced a yearly band camp, created the Arkansas Tech Brass Choir, and added a flag line to the marching band. Sadly, he died suddenly in 1979. Not long after Dr. Witherspoon's death, reports surfaced about odd happenings inside the building named after him. Students claimed to have heard pianos playing late at night, only to find all the practice rooms empty. Others have reported seeing Dr. Witherspoon in the building, including one current theater professor. She claims that he came into the auditorium one day to watch her read a script. She was new to the campus, so she didn't realize the polite man standing at the back of the room had actually been dead for several years. In 1876, Reverend Isham Lafayette Burrow started a school at Altus in Franklin County called the Central Collegiate Institute. In 1884, Reverend Burrow appealed to the Methodist Church for financial help. They purchased the school and changed its name to Hendrix College in 1889. In 1890, the college moved to Conway in Faulkner County. There are several historic buildings and sites on the Hendrix College campus. The president's home was built in 1914 and designed by famous Arkansas architect Charles Thompson. In 1917, the United States entered World War I. Hendrix applied for the Student Army Training Corps, a government program designed to train young men in skills needed for the war effort. 200 young men from Hendrix were trained as part of the program. The war ended before the majority of these recruits actually went to battle. However, there were 6 young men who died as part of the war effort overseas. Robert W. Young was killed in combat. The other 5 died from disease. In 1918, the war helped the spread of a strain of influenza that killed an estimated 50 to 100 million people worldwide. About 7,000 people in Arkansas died from the flu during this time. Colleges were perfect places for diseases like the flu to spread because people lived in close quarters. Half the student body at Hendrix became ill and 2 died. After the war, students raised money for a memorial dedicated to the Hendrix students who died in the war. They built the Young Memorial, which features a doughboy or soldier. Martin Hall was built as a men's dormitory in 1919. Although slated for demolition in the late 1970s, students created a movement to save the building. It was remodeled in 1981 and listed on the National Register in 1984. Henderson Brown College in Arkadelphia also had a Methodist Church affiliation. In 1929, Henderson Brown College merged with Hendrix College because of lack of enrollment and funds. The Methodist-run Galloway Female College in Searcy also merged with Hendrix College in 1933. That same year, Hendrix College built Galloway Hall. It was also designed by Charles Thompson sometime around 1913. Galloway Hall has been an important part of Hendrix life since it was built, particularly the parlor area. While there are several places on the Hendrix campus that are supposedly haunted, Galloway Hall has the most enduring stories. Students say the Galloway maiden hunts its hallways and attic. Students report hearing footsteps in the attic late at night. They also report a presence in the building. The attic door is a focal point for this presence. When students walk up the stairs toward the attic door, they say they feel an overwhelming sadness. That sadness does not go away until the student leaves the stairwell. Arkadelphia's history goes back to the earliest days of Arkansas history after the Louisiana Purchase. In 1808, William Blakely built a blacksmith shop in the area. Not long after, John Hemphill started a salt works across the river from Blakely's shop. Salt was essential to early settlers. Without salt, they could not preserve food. Hemphill's Salt Works was the very first industry in the Arkansas Territory. Arkadelphia is near the site of the Southwest Trail, a series of routes that early pioneers used to travel across Arkansas into Texas. The trail stretched from St. Louis, Missouri to Fulton, Arkansas on the Red River. The only towns on the trail were Jackson, Little Rock, and Washington. That means that travelers stopped at homes along the route to rest. Without proximity to the Southwest Trail, Arkadelphia's history may have been very different. Jacob Barkman and his wife came to the area with John Hemphill. Barkman settled on the Caddo River near the Southwest Trail. He was ambitious and became a very wealthy farmer. He eventually owned 22,000 acres where he grew cotton. Around 1815, Barkman built the first brick house in Clark County. It became a stop for travelers on the Southwest Trail, the site of the first post office in Clark County, and the site of the first session of the Clark County government. Later it became a stagecoach stop. Barkman's house may also have been one of the earliest haunted houses in Arkansas. According to historian Charles Hillman Bruff, there were weird stories of robbers and murders told in connection with the house. He said there were bloodstains on the stairs and secret tunnels beneath the house that stretched to the Caddo River. The house was torn down in the late 1890s. There is still a Barkman house in Arkadelphia, though. The current Barkman house was built for Jacob Barkman's son, James Barkman, around 1860. The house is now owned by Henderson State University. In 1890, the Methodists of Arkadelphia raised money to attract the Central Collegiate Institute to town. Instead, the college moved to Conway and became Hendrix College. The Arkadelphia Methodists decided to start their own school instead. They called it the Arkansas Methodist College. In 1904, the school changed its name in honor of one of its trustees, Captain Charles C. Henderson. Mr. Henderson moved to Arkadelphia in 1879. He made his fortune in the lumber and sawmill businesses. He was involved in Arkansas Methodist College from the beginning. His wife raised funds for the school, and he became a trustee a year after the college opened. He also offered financial help. In 1902, he donated $10,000 to eliminate the college's debts. In 1906, Mr. Henderson built a spectacular house near the university. It was over 8,000 square feet and has over 30 rooms. The Henderson house remained a private residence until 1978, when it was sold to Henderson State University. In 1981, the house was turned into a museum and the local Arkansas Archaeological Survey office. In 1999, the building was restored again. This time, it was transformed into a bed and breakfast that serves alumni, students, visitors, and tourists. On February 3, 1914, the buildings at Henderson College burned, destroying the campus. The students were determined to rebuild their school. They raised nearly $1,000 for the rebuilding fund and worked hard to rescue bricks from the main building for reuse. This incident is often cited as the start of what the school calls Ready Spirit. Despite this tragedy, the college managed to survive for another 15 years before it merged with Hendrix College and the state took over the campus. Henderson College became Henderson State University. In the 1920s, a young man named Joshua from Henderson fell in love with a girl named Jane from rival Ouachita Baptist University. Friends of the couple put tremendous pressure on them to break up because they were dating the enemy. At the time, the differences between the schools were large. They had greatly diverging religious ideals and values. Just before the homecoming dance, Joshua could no longer take the harassment from his friends. He broke up with Jane. She was devastated. Back in her dorm at Ouachita, she put on a black dress and veil because she thought life was no longer worth living. She walked to the cliffs above the river on campus and jumped to her death. During the week of homecoming, Jane hunts the Henderson campus, looking for those that forced Joshua to break up with her. She is seen most often in the girls' dorm, although she has also been seen elsewhere on campus. Another ghost on Henderson State's campus is Simon, who hunts the theater in Arkansas Hall. No one knows exactly where Simon came from, but some speculate he was a student who wanted to be in a play but was killed before he could perform. Simon has appeared to theater professors at the college and likes to flip seats, giggle, and make footstep sounds. He is also known to drop harmless objects from the ceiling onto the stage, like rolled up newspapers. The need for historic preservation in Arkansas is real, and without it, many of the places in this video would not exist. The reality of ghosts is still debatable, though. If you want to know more about Arkansas historic places, check out the AHPP's website at www.arkansaspreservation.com.